I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, you don't know what I'm about to ask you, but we did talk about it during our backstage episode of Right Angle this week at BillWhittle.com. And by the way, this program is made possible, like that program, by the members at BillWhittle.com. Bill, I want to hear your take on what Republicans should do when they are run out of the public square like Ted and Heidi Cruz were from a restaurant in Washington, D.C., trying to enjoy a quiet dinner, and protesters who were upset about the potential confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh crashed their dinner and shouted at them and chanted at them until they politely left the restaurant. So it's not so much what do you think of the people who do such things, but what do you think that we should do when that happens to us?
You're not going to like the answer, Scott.
That shouldn't affect anything.
I'll start by saying that the fundamental problem with America today is that not enough people are being punched in the nose. And and I don't mean that in a kind of a fascist kick the hell out of anybody you disagree with way. What I'm really trying to say by that is we live in an age of no consequences. You can do whatever you want to. You want to go down, and burn a university down because you don't like the speaker, chances are very good you're going to just simply get away with it. I remember actually, as kind of as a counterpoint to this, that one of the Antifa protesters, a young person who was arrested on J20. You remember J20 inauguration day, where we're gonna stop the Nazi war machine. One of these kids got arrested and was looking at some jail time, and he sent out some kind of tweet or email or something and said, "Somebody, I better do something. I mean, I'm in like real trouble here." So, like I said, you're not going to like my answer, but
well, let me just say, I've heard you say this before, that more people need to get punched in the nose. I get the sense that there's an implied more people need to get punched in the nose at a much earlier age.
Well, there's certainly that, but we don't have time travel yet, Scott. If we did, we'd be all out of problems. We'd go back in time and eliminate the most dangerous man and the most destructive man who ever walked the earth, which would probably be Karl Marx. And if you could take a swipe at Saul Alinsky while you're there, that would be a benefit as well. So here's what I mean by this. I don't mean like we should be going down the streets like jackbooted thugs and punching people. The punch in the nose I'm talking about is the same kind of punch in the nose that they gave to Ted Cruz that day, because that's what they did. One thing that is so important that we understand, and we can never lose track of this, is that this particular war we're in, and it is a war, and it's a war for the future of this country, is not being fought by bullets or bayonets. These people are terrified of guns. They're terrified of any kind of violence. It is a war of public opinion. It's a war, mostly, Scotty, their primary weapon is self-censorship. I've been accused of something really awful, which I'm not guilty of. And when I saw it in the LA Times and the Chicago Trib and the Charlotte Observer, I guess it was, I just wanted to crawl under a rock. I was done with this. I was done with this line of work, finished with it. I was done. It was so painful to be slandered like that. And finally, I realized, well, that's the entire purpose of it, and I got over it. But it is a powerful, powerful weapon they have, this social opprobrium. So here's what I'm saying about the rhetorical punch in the nose. The people that did this to Ted Cruz bragged about it, tweeted about it, talked about how proud they were about it, about making a middle-aged man and his gracious wife go to a different restaurant, basically, is what they've accomplished in terms of stopping the Nazi war machine. But they turned it into blowing up a bridge, and that's how they see themselves. They got the striped shirts and they've got the berets and the red scarf and smoking cigarettes, and they're the resistance and they're glamorous, Che Guevara kind of types. What in point of fact, they're just absolutely nothing but utter weenies. And one of the guys who confronted Ted Cruz on the way out said, "We know where you are and you're not safe." That's a personal threat. So all this set up to simply say this: we have to provide consequences to the people that decide to do these things. And I think the consequences need to be, we should have a team of people that is something like, a bit like James O'Keefe's group.
Project Veritas.
Yes, exactly. And a perfect candidate for this, although I do believe that they're essentially incorruptible because there's a group out there called 4chan, which may or may not have had the joy of trolling on this latest.
Michael Avenatti, the attorney for Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, it turns out the whole thing was a 4chan scam.
He's saying this morning on Twitter that it was not, but we'll see.
Whether it was or wasn't, we need somebody with those kind of fundamental, just basic Facebook skills, that kind of thing. And so I know it's a 20-minute setup for the actual solution, but the people that pushed Ted Cruz out of that restaurant, they need to be identified. They need to have their names identified, and they need to be. I'm not saying dox them. I'm not saying make their private information public. I'm completely against that. I think that's extremely irresponsible. But their names should be available. If you want to get to the point where you're going to be bragging about having caused a man to have to cancel his dinner plans, then I want to know your name, and I want to know your Facebook page, and I want to know your Twitter account. This is the battlefield, sad to say though it is. I often think that of all the problems with this current fight for the country that we're in, I think the thing that probably bothers me the most is the execrable low quality of our adversaries. America deserves better enemies than this, honestly. We really do.
Now, Bill, it may just be that I know that you're not a big social media guy, but I'm wondering if part of the reason why you're saying this, that you don't see much of this kind of stuff going on. I'll tell you, after Dr. Christine Blasey Ford made her allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, I saw photographs that she had hoped that nobody would ever see on Twitter and elsewhere. Are you just, it sounds like you're almost saying, we're doing it, but we're not as good as the left. Like we're not getting that replication factor, perhaps, Bill, because the kind of people who are on our side would not retweet the picture of her caressing a champagne bottle with scantily attired or naked.
Right. And most of the time, people on our side won't have pictures of themselves caressing shampoo bottles, scantily attired.
Champagne.
But this is a good example of what I'm talking about. When Dr. Ford stepped forward with these allegations, which to me look flimsier by the moment, she walked into the spotlight. She walked into the public square. And as somebody who lives in a tiny, dark little corner of that spotlight, it has its advantages and it definitely has its disadvantages. And the people who are doing these kind of things, they did it with Milo and his friend. They were having lunch and somebody spotted them and they ran him out of that restaurant. They did it with Charlie Kirk and ran him out of a restaurant. They think this is a big moral victory.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders also run out of a restaurant, I believe.
Okay, so let's find out who these people are. I want to know their names. I want to know their names. I want to know where they go to school. I don't want their private information released. I still have standards, although given the way that these people are fighting, those won't last for long because I believe that you fight an honorable enemy honorably and you fight a dirty fighter as dirty as he's fighting because otherwise you lose.
Okay, Bill, you're a strategist. You're a gamer, okay?
Yeah.
So let's game this out. Let's take that. So we amp it up and we say, okay, Ted Cruz and Heidi Cruz get run out of a restaurant by a chanting mob of a half a dozen or 8 people. Then we reveal their names publicly so that those people are then, shamed? And then where does it go from there? I mean, is there any shame involved?
There is shame involved. The first thing that I think would be, look, there's a lot about this world that I love. And needless to say, the internet makes not only this show possible, but makes most of my work possible just because I have access to so much information. But once something happens to you these days, once you do anything at all that gets any kind of attention, it's there forever. We always used to hear about our permanent record back in high school, Scotty. And if you don't report for detention, it's going on your permanent record. And we lived in pretty steep fear of our permanent records, as I recall. Well, there is an actual permanent record now, and one of the many things that this kind of a retaliation, because that's what it is, could do, is it would show up on any social media search for that person's work history basically for the rest of their lives. But here's what it is, Scott. It pains me, especially after so many of the episodes that we've done, to be talking about this in such military terms, but it's all I'm left with, honestly. It's all I am left with when I see things like this, because we're not doing it to these people. We're not out there, we're not bursting into Elizabeth Warren's teepee and interrupting her pipe smoking activities with the rest of the Native American people that she descended from. We're not doing that. We're just simply having to take it. And so...
Well, Bill, you're suggesting that these people who ran Cruz out of the restaurant haven't already freshened their resumes with this information because they're proud of it.
No, of course. And this is the point I'm trying to get to. They have basically walked into the spotlight. They've decided to become public figures by doing this. Okay? They're on camera. He's a national figure. This act has made them into the spotlight. They've now become public people. But they're not paying the price for being public people. They are having the ability to spread their little video around to all their friends and soak up all of the admiration and all of the rewards. But what they haven't had the joy of experiencing yet is the tide of righteous anger that comes from people who are a little offended by these kind of things. And this is why, once again, I will say it again, probably for the fourth time, I'm not talking about their personal information, but I would very much like to have the Facebook pages and the Twitter accounts of the people that forced Ted Cruz out of the restaurant, because I and a few hundred other million Americans have some interesting things to say to that person. And we'll see how much they like that. I'm just saying there should be consequences. Now, look, when it's all said and done, Scotty, this is actually a pretty simple issue. We're talking about ridiculous things like this and ridiculous solutions like this because we live in a post-law world. I cannot imagine up until the presidency of Barack Obama, if I had been in a restaurant and witnessed a group of strangers come in and start harassing anybody. It doesn't matter if they're a senator, it doesn't matter anything. If there's a person sitting down to dinner and a group of 5 or 6 people come in and start chanting and yelling for this person to get out and calling him a Nazi and stuff, then back in the olden days where I grew up, in stone tablets and dial telephones, somebody would have gone to one of those cordless dial telephones and they would have dialed 911. And then the police would have arrived at the restaurant and the police would enter the building and say, what's going on here? And the restaurant owner would say, these people just walked off the street and harassed my client and my patron here for no reason whatsoever. And the police would say, okay, come with us. And now you have a criminal record. But these are consequences, and we don't have consequences anymore. Hillary Clinton got away with everything. Everybody on the left, what's his name? Ellison. Kavanaugh did nothing. Kavanaugh did nothing. Ellison is a serial sexual offender. We apparently have tapes and unknown number of depositions against him. It doesn't matter. There's no consequences for him because he's a Democrat. One way or another, the only way this is going to stop is if there are some sort of inhibitory consequences to stop these children from coming down to the middle of the middle of the cocktail party being held by adults and basically urinating in the center of the room to get some attention. That's what they're doing. And if you don't punish kids for doing that, then they're going to do it some more.
Well, another way you can get attention for this kind of a message is by hitting that notification button on YouTube so you won't miss a single one, sharing this, liking it, spreading it around on social media, and going to BillWhittle.com and becoming a member there so you can become a citizen producer of not only Bill Whittle Now, but the other programs that you'll find at BillWhittle.com. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.